Stopping DUIs before they start. Wednesday at 6.
Today on Katie. Life after unimaginable loss. Parents searching for hope after losing their children to horrific crimes. Lacey Peterson's parents speak out.
The fact that you all have been able to go on has given hope to so many people.
Natalie Holloway's mother on finding peace again.
Even when you think it's complete devastation, you will reconnect with life again.
And what they want you to talk to your kids about.
Don't pretend that this couldn't happen.
From Studio One in New York, it's Katie.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. The people you're going to hear from today will be very familiar to you, as they are to me. Their stories haunted us, their strength inspired us, and their cries for answers brought awareness, and in many cases, real change. I'm talking about parents who endured tragic loss in some of the most high-profile missing persons cases of our time. I've interviewed each of these moms and dads over the course of my career, and I've often wondered, how are they doing today? Have they been able to move on? People who've experienced this kind of loss know there is no such thing as closure. We're beginning with the parents of Lacey Peterson, Sharon Rocha and Ron Gransky. Lacey was 7.5 months pregnant when she disappeared, seemingly without a trace. What unfolded in the months that followed shocked and horrified the nation. 27-year-old Lacey Peterson and her husband, 30-year-old Scott Peterson, appeared to be the all-American couple, happily married and expecting their first child, a little boy they planned to name Connor. But on Christmas Eve 2002, things took a shocking turn. Scott arrived home from a fishing trip. Lacey was nowhere to be found. He called Lacey's parents, and within hours, a missing person investigation was underway. For months, police and volunteers searched endlessly for clues, while her family issued emotional pleas for her safe return.
Whoever has her, please, please, please let her go. Bring her back.
We love her so much. We want her back.
As the story made national headlines, Scott Peterson remained reluctant to talk to the press.
Have you taken a polygraph test?
And suspicious details of his life began to emerge. He had secretly purchased a 14-foot fishing boat just 2 weeks before Lacey's disappearance and taken out a $250,000 life insurance policy in her name. And it was discovered he'd been having an affair with 27-year-old Amber Fry. On April 13th, 2003, 4 months after Lacey's disappearance, remains of a baby boy washed ashore from the San Francisco Bay. 1 day later, the body of a woman who had been pregnant was also found nearby. Shortly after, Scott Peterson was detained in La Jolla, California. He had dyed his hair blonde and was found with his brother's driver's license and $1,500 in cash. Believing Peterson was intending to flee, officers immediately arrested him. After 5 months of gut-wrenching testimony, 184 witnesses, and hundreds of exhibits, jurors reached a unanimous verdict. Scott Peterson was found guilty and sentenced to death for the murders of his wife Lacey and her unborn son Connor. Please welcome Sharon and Ron. Thank you both so much for being here. I so appreciate you both coming, even though this requires reliving in many ways this horrible, horrible chapter in your lives. And I'm just wondering, Sharon, I know it's been more than 10 years. It goes without saying that you think about Lacey every single day.
Oh, certainly. You don't get over it. You get through it, but you don't get over it.
I know that you stood by Scott as if he were your own son. You stood by him through a good part of the investigation. He even continued to call you Mom until the last time you spoke with him. So how do you reconcile that? This young man who called you Mom, who you treated like a son, and yet he did this. How do you wrap your head around that, Sharon?
I still haven't, because the person that was married to my daughter was not the person that I came to know afterwards. It was just, obviously, we didn't know Scott. I think his life was just pretty much a facade. I think he just played into whatever you wanted him to be. That's what he was.
Very good actor.
Why do you think he did this? I mean, when all is said and done.
I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I don't think he wanted the responsibility of having a
But that doesn't constitute
child.
murder.
But he thought that his only way out was, because I don't think he wanted to lose everything either. I don't think he wanted, for stupid reasons, but...
And I think the other thing was that he still wanted to be the good guy. If he divorced Lacey, he wouldn't be the good person. So I think maybe he felt that was his way of getting out of his marriage and still being considered a good person.
A lot of people have said, well, you should have noticed something, didn't you know? He was an extremely nice and likable guy. There's very few people that didn't like him, and women just loved him because he knew how to say the right things at the right time to make you feel good.
And that was the narcissism, I think.
Remember, a police officer said, kind of reminds you of Ted Bundy, doesn't it? So apparently, which didn't make me feel too good, but in other words, I guess there are people out there that can pull something like he did and just be...
Are extremely manipulative and know how to present themselves in a way that belies who they really truly are.
Correct. Exactly.
Would you ever want to speak to Scott? And if so,
no.
If you did, what would you say to him? I'm afraid to ask you, Ron.
You're afraid he'll tell you.
Well, yeah. The problem is I'll probably wind up being dead before he will. And he's going to get all the benefits that we, all as taxpayers, pay to keep him alive. He has computers, he has TVs, I think he even has a chance to marry. Now, this all amazes me. And everybody probably thinks that the death penalty should be abolished. But what do you do with animals like this? Do you give them the right to have computers, television, while our daughter's laying in the ground? I just don't think it's right.
Well, when we come back,
that's, I would say to him,
we're going to talk about what Scott Peterson is doing today and his future and how you both feel about that, as well as Lacey's legacy. That's right after this.
Still to come, an unthinkable crime. Her daughter kidnapped from her own front yard.
You had no idea that a convicted pedophile lived across the street.
Her important message for other parents.
Talk with your children. Use real-life moments to come up with their safety plan.
That's coming up.
And we're back with Sharon Rocha and Ron Gransky, mother and stepfather of Lacey Peterson. In 2002, on Christmas Eve, Lacey went missing from her Modesto, California home. 2 years later, her husband Scott was convicted of murdering both Lacey and her unborn son, Connor. Peterson was sentenced to death in 2004. If Scott is executed, would either of you want to be present at the execution?
I don't.
No.
I would. I just like to see him suffer a little bit. I'm sorry, I would.
And Sharon, do you want Scott Peterson to die? Do you think he should be executed?
I mean, it's not as though I want him dead. That's not, no. That doesn't really resolve anything, but that is the punishment that he was given, so.
I know that there have been reports that dozens of women have contacted San Quentin, lending their support. Actually, some of them have even offered to marry him. What is your reaction?
We can go out to the cemetery where Lacey's buried and look at a gravestone. Why he can take all of these. I don't understand it. Women making their propositions and to him. We've had people say that he was innocent and that they loved him. I just don't understand it.
It's pretty mind-boggling, isn't it?
It is.
Dan Abrams is here. He's our legal analyst. And, Dan, there are a lot of questions about this. First of all, he was convicted and sentenced to death in 2004, right? So here we are in 2013. I understand he filed an appeal just last year. Can you explain this?
Yeah, first appeal in 2012 in connection with this case. Look, California death row appeals take a long time. This is taking even longer and a real long shot that any of these appeals will go anywhere. From the moment Scott Peterson was convicted, his attorney, Mark Garagos, had been complaining about the media attention and saying, oh, this is why he got convicted. He was convicted because the media was against him. And that's one of the main grounds for appeal. That will not work in connection with this case. And the appeals process is going to take a very long time, but he's going to remain on death row.
In April of 2004, President Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, also known as Lacey and Connor's Law. Tell us about that and why that was significant.
Well, it's a federal law, so it applies to federal cases where if a pregnant woman is killed, it's considered two people. Both the fetus and the mother recognized as two individuals. It was a controversial law at the time because it sort of crossed over with the abortion debate. And the question became, well, wait a second. If you're viewing the fetus as a person in connection with this law, is that going to fundamentally change the way we view abortion? But it was passed, and it's a law that's on the books that's still applied.
And was that meaningful for you? I know you were present when...
We lobbied for it quite a bit.
Right.
It was.
Yes.
As far as the abortion issue, it had nothing to do with abortion. It was violent acts of crime. So if the fetus was murdered, whether the mother was or not, then that became the federal.
And Lacey was 7.5 months pregnant.
Yes.
She had our grandson. Yeah.
I know that Lacey's story had such a profound effect on so many people, including Ruth Rosen. And Ruth is here today. She wanted to be here for the taping. Ruth, tell me how this story impacted you.
I'd like to say thank you, Sharon. I was at my lowest point. My daughter was getting ready to die. Oh. She had brain cancer. She was my only daughter. And at 15 years old, I got out of the shower. I was exhausted, going in to check on her, and I stopped, mesmerized by an interview that you were doing with Katie. And I said to myself, here's a woman who has her child brutally ripped from her arms, and I get to go say goodbye to my child. So I picked my head up. I watched you laugh. Now, maybe it wasn't that laugh, the gut-wrenching laugh, but it was a laugh that I needed right there. You brought me hope. You gave me purpose. So after I said goodbye to her, I started a foundation, and I now am the hope for families who children have cancer. We bring them normalcy throughout their journey so that they can focus on being normal as a family.
Great.
So thank you.
Wonderful. You know, that's sort of moving, isn't it? That I think so many people were touched by your experience and by Lacey's life and the loss of that life. And the fact that you all have been able to go on has given hope to so many people like Ruth.
You know, Sharon wrote a book about her experiences and everything. And it's amazing how many letters came to her, thanking her for they'd either been through this or lost someone, and how it helped them to deal with their loss. And so
a lot of people, I think, go through something like this, as Ruth did, and they wonder, how are they going to be able to put their lives together again?
And I wondered the same thing for a long time. It took a long time for me. I mean, I've had some really, really bad days. I still do. I'm sure you do too. But it takes a long time. I mean, it's not like you wake up one day and say, okay, I think it's time to get back to normal. It just doesn't happen. But I just want to touch on something that Ruth had said about the laughter. I remember the first time that I actually laughed about something. I felt so guilty about it because we still hadn't found Lacey yet. And I felt like I shouldn't be laughing at all. You don't know how to deal with the emotions or the impact of what has happened.
When you both think about Lacey today, do you think about what happened or this beautiful, vibrant girl?
I miss Lacey.
she was so smart. She was, and I was just amazed at how intelligent she was. And I'll always remember that she left me a phone message that she had a Christmas present for me, and
your birthday present.
Yeah, birthday. Yeah, and she'd see me when she got back, and I never saw her again alive.
Well, I'm I don't want to say I'm happy to see you all again because I wish we were never having this conversation, truly.
But it is nice to see you.
But it's nice to see you both, and I just wish you continued healing.
Thank you.
And some peace, as much peace as can be achieved when you suffer such a loss.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And up next, we're going to be talking with the mother of Chandra Levy and why she questions if the right man is in prison for her daughter's murder. That's right after this.
Next.
It took the authorities 9 years to make an arrest in your daughter's murder. Why do you think it took so long?
That's next.
Welcome back. Today we've been talking about life after devastating loss. In May of 2001, just days before her college graduation, California native Chandra Levy went missing. She had been an intern for the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Washington, D.C. Within weeks, the media began to speculate about a relationship she had with a married congressman named Gary Condit. A little more than a year later, Chandra's remains were found in D.C.'s Rock Creek Park. Nearly 9 years later, an arrest was made. Ingemar Guandike was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder in February of 2011 and sentenced to 60 years in prison. But many close to the case still feel there are unanswered questions, including Chandra's mother, Susan. She's here today, along with our legal analyst, Dan Abrams. Susan, thank you for being here. I covered this story, and as did so many other people. Why do you think so many people, Dan, immediately suspected that Congressman Condit had something to do with Chandra Levy's disappearance?
Well, I think it was because of the suspicion of an affair was the first issue. And then number 2 was because every time Condit was asked about it, he was so cagey. And I think that made him look guilty. Particularly in a number of the public interviews he did, he was just unwilling to address that question head on. And when you are someone who everyone's wondering about and you're unwilling to answer a question publicly, and then he would say things like, well, this is out of respect for the Levy family, et cetera, and I know the Levy family didn't feel the same way about his comments as did he. And so it created a whole situation where people kept saying, well, why won't he just address this and answer it? And I think that's may have been what led the police to have questions about him too. But look, in the end, the police feel that they examined him, they considered him, and they excluded him.
Susan, it took the authorities 9 years to make an arrest in your daughter's murder. Why do you think it took so long?
I don't really understand it, but they didn't find her right away. There was evidence problems, I guess. It still confuses me. The search wasn't done totally appropriate because the police failed to do a proper search. I don't know, it seems awfully long, and the questions often remind me, is this the right person?
So you have real reservations that the right man is in prison for this crime?
I only know that there was a possible scream in her apartment the night before, and she was not a jogger in the park, and why would she not carry any identification with her? Nothing.
And Dan, what about this case against this man who is now in prison? I know you've studied it. You covered this story.
Yeah. Look, it's coming so far after the fact, first of all. And the reason he was linked to it is that he was connected to 2 other assaults in that park. And then you have fellow prisoners, a fellow prisoner in particular, coming forward and saying, in essence, that he confessed to it. But, that's comparatively, right, to other cases I've covered, this is not one of the strongest cases. He was convicted. He's now appealing, saying that witnesses lied in connection with this case. And look, in most of these appeals, I say, these guys have almost no shot. This is not a frivolous appeal.
What are the authorities claiming? That Chandra was jogging in Rock Creek Park?
Yeah, I mean, look, they believe that she was attacked and assaulted. And, in connection with Mrs. Levy's questions, they think that she did go jogging in the park. They think she did go without identification, etc. And that, that even if this was something out of the ordinary for her, that's what she did.
We did reach out to his attorney and for a statement, but we were declined that statement. Susan, what has it been like for you, just first of all, dealing with the loss, but also dealing with the not knowing?
It's been hell on earth. I did not like people smearing my daughter's good character.
I don't think anyone blames Chandra for any of this. You know, affair, no affair, to some degree, you know, if it wasn't connected to the murder, who cares? And I think that's how, you know, I think Chandra as the person was remembered because her family got out there and ensured that what Chandra was like as a person became her legacy.
I think that you were a constant advocate for your daughter. I think when it was very difficult to speak out publicly about the case, you somehow mustered the courage.
Thank you.
To get out there and talk about her and to keep attention on the case when it was a forgotten headline.
Thank you, that's true.
How did you find the strength to do that, Susan?
Because I'm a mother, and our children are the most precious thing, and what can you do when you lose a child?
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for talking about Chandra, and we can only hope that justice is served in this case, and the person who did this will be put behind bars for the rest of his life.
I hope so.
Dan, thank you. And when we come back, kidnapped from their own front yards, how two families' tragedies may be protecting your kids today. That's right after this.
Still to come, the mother of Natalie Holloway, 8 years after her devastating disappearance.
I've learned that there is hope and that in time you can begin to live life again and to reconnect.
That's coming up.
Today we're reconnecting with the parents we all grieved with after their children went missing. Their stories captivated and, yes, crushed all of us. Our next two stories are about children who were abducted right in front of their own homes. On July 15th, 2002, 5-year-old Samantha Runyon was playing with a friend in her front yard. A stranger named Alejandro Avila approached the girls and said he had lost his dog. When Samantha went to help, Avila forced her into his car. She kicked and screamed, but was quickly overpowered. Samantha's mother, Erin, pleaded for her daughter's safe return.
She is such a sweet child. We don't want vengeance, we just want our baby back.
But the next day, Samantha's body was discovered in the woods. She'd been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. The case brought back memories of another child abduction. On July 29, 1994, 7-year-old Megan Kenka was near her home in Hamilton Township, New Jersey, when she was lured away by a neighbor, Jesse Temendegas, who also used the ploy of a puppy. By sundown, Megan's parents, Richard and Maureen Kenka, realized something was wrong.
We can't find Megan. I'm scared inside.
The fear and the heartache, it's your worst nightmare.
The next day, Maureen and Richard's nightmare became a reality when Megan's body was discovered at a park nearby. Megan had also been sexually assaulted and strangled. Jesse Temendegas, a convicted sex offender, confessed to the crime and is serving life in prison without the possibility of parole. Two families torn apart by senseless violence. Their children taken away forever as they innocently played in their front yards. Samantha's mother, Erin Runyon, and Megan's parents, Maureen and Richard, are all here. And, it's difficult, I think, for people who didn't know your daughters to watch that. So for you, it must be excruciating. And I could see on all of your faces how painful that is.
It is still hard. Something about the context of the crime is hard. But really, I'm glad to be here because we have to prevent these crimes. And the only way to prevent these crimes is to make people realize that they're real and that we are real people and these were real little girls.
Do you feel the same way?
To a large degree, yes. It's, it's very difficult to, imagine losing your children, especially so brutally as ours were taken from us. This is something we will live for the rest of our lives.
Tell us a little bit about Megan.
Megan was a very, very bright little girl. The time was just cut so short for us, and we're just devastated by this whole thing.
She loved bald-headed dolls and bald-headed babies. She just loved them. And or with just a little piece of hair out the middle of the head, and she could be playing with a doll, or she could be rolling around in the mud with the Tonka trucks with her brother, and getting all dirty. She was just the light. She was our youngest, and she was one of the three lights in our life.
Jeremy and Jessica, your children, are here. Thank you for coming.
This is the first time in 19 years that they've ever gotten involved in anything that we've done like this.
And why did you want to be here today? I feel very honored that you are.
Just wanted to support my mom and dad for everything that they've done over the years with the law. I have my wife here to help get me through the tough times. I have my sister. I look at them as an inspiration. Now I can, me being a new parent, can sit there and use that towards my son and try to protect him so we don't have the same thing happen again.
Jessica, why did you want to be here?
I wanted to be here as a support for my brother, sister-in-law, my parents, to kind of put out there that there are, for other siblings that have lost siblings, that, we've gone through it, we know how you feel. As time goes on, you learn to live with it, but it's just as hard every day to live with it.
Aaron, Samantha was also just an incredible little girl. I think you couldn't look at photos of her face and not fall in love with her.
It's really true.
and tell us a little bit about your daughter.
She was literally my pride and joy. She was so much fun, very creative. She loved to, every day she was either leaving me a drawing, a picture, or I would joke that she was going to be a lawyer, and she'd leave me notes that said, "Are we going to go to the park today? Yes, no, maybe, sign here." And so, she was only 5 years old, but she was super, super bright. She was in the first grade, and just a love. I really try to focus on who she was and remember who she was, not just how she died.
Let's talk briefly about the people responsible for this. And I know, Maureen, you had no idea that a convicted pedophile lived across the street. And there were other convicted pedophiles in your neighborhood as well?
There were 3 that lived in the house together. 3.
Did you, Richard, have suspicions about these individuals?
Our neighbors were our neighbors, and, that's how they blended in. They were they were invisible, so to speak.
People would ask us after the fact, like, did you ever see anything? Or did you ever think anything? I guess, never thought anything. I guess, if anything, we just thought they were boarders, living there. But there was nothing to see.
Aaron, what can you tell us about the circumstances of Samantha's abduction, without going into too much detail, obviously, but his background and where he lived and all those things?
Right. Well, he lived about an hour away, and he had been acquitted of multiple counts of continuous child sexual abuse against 2 girls. They were cousins. One of those cousins lived in our condominium community, and she had just moved. And so he was familiar with the community and used to drop her off at her family's house. But when he came back, she was gone, and so he drove around again, we're told, and grabbed the first little girl he saw playing outside.
I know that you addressed him during the sentencing.
Yes.
Let's listen to what you had to say.
And you hurt her, and you crushed her, you terrified her, until her heart stopped. And she fought, and I know she fought you. I know she looked at you with those amazing brown eyes, and you still wanted to kill her. And I don't understand it, and I never will.
Why was it so important, Aaron, for you to speak at the sentencing?
I didn't even know until I was finally able to say those words how much I needed to say those words. It was a huge weight off of my shoulders when he was finally sentenced.
And tell us where these men are today.
The man who killed Samantha is on death row in California.
And what about you all?
He was originally given the death penalty in New Jersey, but our former governor commuted his sentence, and all the other death row inmates, so he's now in prison. He should never see the light of day.
Well, I know all three of you have worked very hard to try to create something positive in your daughter's name. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how Megan's parents took the law into their own hands and what every parent needs to know about protecting their child. That's right after this. We're back with Erin Runyon, whose daughter Samantha was just 5 years old when she was kidnapped and murdered in 2002, as well as Maureen and Richard Kanka, whose daughter Megan was also kidnapped and murdered 8 years earlier. The crimes were committed by two different men, but they were eerily similar, and both men had previous encounters with authorities for sexual assault involving children. Richard, I know that shortly after your daughter's death, lawmakers took action to establish what we all now know as Megan's Law. Tell me how that came about and what exactly that is for people who may not be all that familiar with it.
Actually, it was my father and my father-in-law had said something about, we have to do something to get a law passed so parents know where these individuals are staying. And then there was a petition drive that got started, and I think it was about 89 days or so, we had gotten about 425,000 signatures, and Governor of New Jersey, Governor Whitman, signed the legislation on October 31st, 1994.
And what exactly does the law do, Maureen?
What they did was they set up a tiering system, which is in most of the states in the country, where they tier up an offender from a low, moderate, or a high-risk offender. And depending on what tier you're in, low, medium, or high, that's where notification would go out, whether usually it's the moderate and the high-risk offenders are notified to the public. They put together an internet registry, and every state in the country now has an internet registry that lists, 2 states list all the offenders, regardless of what tier you would be, and the rest of them list you according to what tier you're in. The one thing that we try to stress, though, to parents is to remember that this is only the ones that we know about. There are so many out there that we don't know about that may have committed crimes that they just not have been convicted and caught for. So, you have to educate your children, and you can do it without scaring them. It's a matter of enforcing embodying yourself with the knowledge and learning what you have to teach yourself and your kids to make them safe.
And Erin, tell us about the organization you started to help honor and remember Samantha.
Yes, we started the Joyful Child Foundation, and we have launched the BRAVE program. So we teach children how to be safe, how to recognize, avoid, and hopefully be able to defend themselves if they are ever faced with danger. And then we also teach parents about recognizing predatory behaviors, risk reduction around child abduction, and we teach them how to use Megan's Law.
And what advice would you give parents watching this show who are absolutely terrified and worried that something would happen to their children? Because here you are, just normal, loving, wonderful parents, and this happened to you.
Talk to your children. Don't bury your head in the sand, and don't pretend that this couldn't happen. Talk with your children. Use real life moments to come up with their safety plans and talk with them about them. Ultimately, when these types of crimes happen to children, it's when they're alone. There's no adult right there to intervene. So your child is the one who has to be empowered to think critically in those situations. So come up with your plan for if they get lost in a store, or if you're going to an amusement park. What are we going to do if we get separated? How are you going to find me? Make sure they know your cell phone number. And I think you should actually teach them physical defense skills so that they can have a chance to defend themselves. People who prey on children are not looking for a challenge. They're looking for an easy opportunity. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children did a study of 500 attempted abductions, and in all of those cases, 82% of the time, it was the child's physical resistance that enabled the child to escape. So frankly, I think every child in America deserves that education.
Well, Aaron and Maureen and Richard, thank you all so much, because it's such an important message for all parents. And thank you for coming here and sharing your story.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And to learn more, by the way, about the Joyful Child Foundation, as well as Megan's Law in your state, you can go to our website at katiecouric.com. And when we come back, Natalie Holloway's mother, Beth, that's right after this. Today we've been talking about life after tremendous loss. In 2005, Beth Holloway was thrust into the media spotlight as a tireless advocate for her missing daughter, Natalie, who vanished while vacationing with friends in Aruba. And she's here today. Beth, thank you for being here. And you know, we've been talking to all these families, and it has been just heartbreaking to see them and for them to relive their story. And I'm wondering how you've been able to get through this, where you have found the strength.
Well, it's bittersweet, because it's when you go back to the event, and it's devastating, and at that time it's happening, you're all over the map emotionally and physically, and you think, how will you ever reconnect with life again? And to see everyone here today, as I said, it's bittersweet, but it's also empowering.
I know that Sharon Rocha reached out to you when this happened. And in fact, many of these families are friends and have sought each other out for comfort and support. Has that been helpful in some ways, Beth?
Oh, absolutely. It has been. And it's an interesting story, just say with Sharon and I, when I was in Aruba, this was probably during June of 2005, Sharon had called me. And one of my girlfriends had answered the phone and said, Sharon Rocha wants to speak with you. And I thought, why? I thought, we don't have anything in common, because I'm going to get Natalie and we're going home. And so I was in such, I think back to that denial time, and now where I am now, and I think, wow, I never could have imagined that the journey would even propel me 8 more years. I just couldn't wrap my mind around it. So she was a smart woman. She knew to reach out to me early. And that's what I think we do, is we do try to reach out to others to give them hope and inspire them in some way to help them through their journey.
We were talking earlier about how painful it is to not ever be able to bury your daughter and not know what happened to her. And I know that Natalie's father petitioned a judge last year and succeeded in having her declared dead. And I'm wondering what that process was like for you.
I mean, it was just a very sad moment for me, because when you think about it, all the work that I had done was in trying to find Natalie, and had worked tirelessly. And it was almost as if it were a slap in the face just to have a judge all of a sudden just, well, we're going to declare her deceased. And I thought, you know, it felt like all my work that I had done was kind of like disregarded.
Does the not knowing in some ways still give you hope? You know, you hear stories like what happened in Cleveland, and you think, wow, you know, is there any possibility? Do you allow yourself to hold on to even just a scintilla of hope?
I do in a way, but I try not to go there very much, because I feel like that's something that I can't control what happens, and I've just really tried to stay focused on what I could, you know, wrap my mind and arms around. After we learned the ferocity with which the other young girl was murdered at the hands of Iran, Stephanie Flores, I think I was really beginning to let go of that place in my mind, as you said, and not go there too much.
I know that over the years, Joran van der Sloot has been questioned and even arrested in connection with Natalie's disappearance, but he's currently serving time in a Peruvian prison for another crime. And Dan, can you tell us what's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, he was convicted of murdering another woman who he met at a casino, and actually he connected it to this case by claiming, I guess, that she had been looking at something on his computer related to the case, and that he got angry, etc. And but he's now serving a 28-year sentence. He's seeking to reduce the sentence. He'll have to serve at least 2/3 of that sentence. And at that point, he could be extradited to the United States to serve time for a crime he committed actually against Beth, a separate crime with regard to extorting money.
What has he done to you, Beth?
He reached out, I guess it was, shortly before the 5-year anniversary of her disappearance, and he contacted me, and he actually tried to sell me Natalie's remains. So, I mean, it was, 5 years later, he still was able to torture and torment us, but...
And he took money as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So...
How did he take money?
Well, what else would a parent do if they think that there's a chance to bring their loved one home? As I did it. I transferred the $25,000 to his account, and we had a lot going on. I will say that through law enforcement, there were a lot of things going on in order to help me make that decision. But honestly, I would have and still would do anything and everything I can to have an answer as to at least even to recover her remains. And he knew that.
And so that money is gone forever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That is so despicable.
And the timing of it was just unimaginable. I mean, it was just weeks before he murdered Stephanie Flores. So if we'd have been just a little bit closer to having everything all lined up for the arrest of him for the wire fraud, then we could have prevented Stephanie Flores from being murdered. But, we didn't make it. So,
what have you learned, Beth, through this whole ordeal when all is said and done?
I've learned that there is hope, and that in time you can begin to live life again and to reconnect. And it's a lot of hard work. A lot of steps have to be taken. But I think for me, I think that's been probably my most valuable lesson.
Well, I'm so glad to see you again. So glad that you are reconnecting and able to find even some joy.
Oh, yes.
In life.
Yeah.
And we just wish you all the best, Beth. Thank you so much. And we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Obviously an intense and emotional hour, but I'm so grateful to the families who were here today. As sad and devastating as their stories are, these moms and dads also inspire us so much. They've turned their grief into advocacy and done all they can to bring about the kind of change that can protect your children and mine. This, of course, is a club that no one ever hopes to join, but they do take comfort and solace in one another. The only other people who can truly understand what life is like after this kind of profound loss. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.